So Lalita, I guess I got an update that we've gone live.
Let me just check from my end as well.
Sure. I think Annie is also joined us. Hi, Annie.
Hello, good morning and good evening.
Good morning to you. So just for everyone's update, Scott is joining us from Boston. So we're about 12 hours apart, roughly, I guess, or that's about 7:30 in the morning for you.
It's 8.
Eight.
So we're on a half hour. Yeah, this is getting complicated.
All right then. So Scott, thank you very much for joining us. We've gone live, and just to introduce Scott to everyone, I guess some of us have met Scott before. But for some of us who have joined for the first time, Scott is a professor in counseling psychology from Boston University, specifically from the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. I had the privilege and the pleasure of working with Scott over the last few months to develop our certification program. And Scott has been very generous with his time. And I had requested Scott to share some of his thoughts on some of the common challenges we all face in individual counseling. I managed to gather some of the questions that came in from all of you while you're conducting your sessions with students. And I had the time to share that with Scott, but we'd like to have this more conversational, right, Scott? So if any questions come to you as and when we move forward, we would be more than happy to take them up. So over to you, Scott.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Oh, try one more time. Sorry about that. Almost there. So as we get started, I wanted to talk about last night I was out at a school and was we were doing some career development, kind of just it wasn't a job fair, it was more of just a learning fair type thing at one of the elementary and K-8 schools. And I had the privilege, I love talking with teachers that are so passionate about why they do the work they do. And in this case, it was a teacher who left the profession she was in for 15 years so she could teach reading to young children. And she said, this is the most meaningful job I've ever had because I really feel like every day I'm making a difference. And I think that is something that motivates all of us that are here. This idea, she's doing all kinds of additional professional development to hone her craft. And I just see you all in that same vein. It's the kind of educators I'm always excited to work with because you're here for the reasons that go well beyond a paycheck or just the support. It really is seeing that you're having an impact and loving it for that. And it means we have to work so much harder, I think, when working with youth. And even the questions I'm starting to get already are certainly a sign of the kind of passion and interest you all have in this work. So I'm gonna be sharing my screen, and I'm gonna rely on Thomas and Annie around the chat if there's questions that come up. But I wanted to just set the tone for this session and what I think one, what I was asked to be able to ready to do, but also to provide some opportunities for us to shape this. So what I would like to focus today's session around is working with parents. A lot of what I'm going to be describing it's the same process for working with youth. But I know that working with parents in those moments can also be a specific challenge. So I wanted to hit on those. There are some topics already coming in that are awesome, and I want to be able to address those. But I think what we're going to, Thomas and I will go back and continue coming up with other sessions where we can hit on some of those. I think one of the big ones, like, and it comes up all the time, what happens when our students' aspirations may be different from what the assessment says? How are we handling that? How do we handle the cultural disagreements between parents and students? Some of those things are really important topics that I don't know we'll be able to talk about specifically today, but we can certainly come back on those. But I'd like to hear right now as we get started, it's going to help me frame what I want to talk about and the things I brought in to know more about the context and issues that are going on as you're working with parents. And so I'd love to hear what the challenges are as you're in sessions. Just challenges or comments, things that are working, maybe things like that would be great. And I don't know, I think putting them in chat would be fantastic. But Thomas, also, if there's a really great one that pops up, let's have someone come off and maybe explain a little bit so I can get to know you all a little bit better and just to have a chance to have some dialogue.
Sure, Scott, will do. So Bhavna's raised her hand. Bhavna, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening. My first question was that there's so much hype around this AI thing and all, parents are also really scared and they want to have a short kind of an answer from career counselors, like going forward, which is the safest kind of career to get into when AI is probably taking jobs from all the sectors and all. So how to address that kind of an issue? And also, especially with respect to the students, when they are, some of them are planning to pursue some unconventional career like being a model or being a dancer or being a theater artist, then how do we, answer these queries related to AI?
So we are going to do a whole session on AI. I have one ready that's going to go through all of this. And it's the important piece to the question is which of the careers are being displaced by AI and which careers are augmenting, right? AI. So an augmented AI is where I'm using it as a tool in the work, but it's not, so it's for efficiencies and things like that. There are some really important issues going on in that second piece for our young adults that we have to talk about. So I do have a presentation prepared on that. And I think it would be worthy a whole conversation to make that happen. As far as your second one goes, I know you were talking about it in relation to AI, but I want to talk about it in the general. They come up with you're calling it an unrealistic career. And certainly we can use probability statistics to say, if you want to be that cricket athlete or, oh, you want to be a this, the probabilities are such, right? But the answer I'll give, and we can, this will be the one I give all the time, and this comes up constantly, is we say, great, that's awesome. Now, what are two others? So we don't tell them no, because honestly, we don't know if they're going to be that talented. We don't know where they're at, and they can emerge into some of those areas. But also, as they're emerging into that and putting some time in, they're learning more about themselves and they're building confidence that can transfer into some other areas. So even if they're not totally successful, what we're supporting them on is backup plans. And so we know the research says that holding on to three goals in life at one time is really healthy because now you're looking for ways to optimize, thinking about opportunities you have to continue building the skills and competencies and interests in those areas. Having three allows the adaptability and flexibility when things don't go right. Okay, and so that's where I look at it. But I never tell a student, no, I don't like the word realistic. It's great, wow, and it's always an and. What can you tell me more? Let's get two more. Okay, and then holding on to, and even if they have a great one that's realistic, I still want two more. You never know what's going to happen. Right? And so we want to make sure that they have a range of opportunities and see how their skills can move into a variety of places. So thank you for that question because it's one of my favorites.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So any others, Thomas, on the topic around parents? Do we have any?
We have one question from me too. Generally, parents have the ultimate say as far as career choice of the children is concerned. And it
Yeah.
gets still difficult to convince parents. It's a major bottleneck and a hurdle that she's experienced. And how do we want to handle such situations?
Fantastic. Thank you, me too. That is definitely, I've heard that. I'm aware of that. I know it happens in the US too, but not to the extent that it happens in India and when I was in Singapore and working in China. Certainly there's other regions where that's a major issue. The parents have got the decision made. It's usually some type of prestigious pathway, right? Something in science, something in medicine, lawyers, all these different things, right? So an engineering course. So let's talk about that in relation to this. But before I do that, are there any other topics?
Uh, that's about it for now. I'll keep
Okay.
sharing as I keep getting.
I have another hand up. Manju?
Sometimes parents they want us counselors to make the decisions for the child,
Mhm.
and rather than helping them in the process of decision making, they expect that we should make the final decisions. So how
You're
to
the
deal with
expert.
this challenge?
Right. You're the expert. You should have the answers, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge challenge as well. That's a huge challenge. Well, I'll tell you, I have some thoughts on both of those things. Let's talk about it from what we call a working alliance. And that's kind of what I'm framing this as is how do we build a working alliance with our clients? And in this case, the client is our parent. Okay. So the parent or the guardian. There's a lot of research in this space. I'm going to give you the big buckets, and then there's a little research around what I'm going to be framing out as I think ways that can address both Manju's point and our other comment as well. So the idea here is how do we develop kind of a collaborative, trusting partnership with the family. And we know that our listening skills are the key for doing that. Are we accurately hearing what it is that they're saying? And I think that's something, even if we're disagreeing and we're not sure this is the right, their attitudes may be very strong and rigid and we're not happy with it, we still have to reflect that we're hearing what those are so they know we're listening, right? And that's part of the empathy comes through that as well when we start talking about the challenges or the different things that might be going on as they're nervous about this whole area with AI, things like that. So we want the client to know that we understand and we appreciate and we value who they are in the role that they're coming in with. The next part then is something that we started with today. What are the goals of the session? What are the things that they're hoping as parents that we're going to address? But also we have a structure here. We have a plan for what we're going to be addressing, but we're willing to negotiate. And that helps establish a working alliance because the parents are realizing you have a plan, you have something there. It's not just, some counseling is very open and you're just letting the client flow and take it any direction they want. We're more structured in career development. We do have an idea of what we want to be covering. And the idea is to be able to talk about those and then make sure that they're comfortable with that. When we're describing the career counseling process for the first time, it might involve working with the parents on here's the specific tasks we're going to do. Here's the structure and giving them some idea of what their child is going to go through. It presents us as a professional. It helps them understand that we have control of the process, even though we're not going to be controlling them, but we do have a sense of how this works. And it's just like when you go to a medical doctor, you don't want the doctor asking you, well, what kind of things do you want to do? How do you want us to do the surgery? You want a professional who has a plan, but is also listening and willing to respond to your needs and your concerns. And that's sort of the pathway that we're taking with this. Questions or reactions on that? So one of the things to get things started, and this is also about framing. One of the things I've also heard hasn't come up in our questions today is feeling at times that the session goes on too long or that they're not ready to leave and you're just being pushed too long in terms of those sessions. So one of the ways in which we can facilitate that however long you have is to let them know up front. So when we make that warm welcome, right, we're trying to tell you you have two different options here. One is the describing what career counseling is, but you start off with how many minutes we have today, right? What is the plan? What are we going to be covering? So they know that there's a boundary in terms of the conditions that we have for being able to support them, but also let them know that there'll be opportunities. We'll do this in a moment, but there's opportunities to meet again. So we don't have to get to everything, but we'll reschedule some time as we go. But in this particular statement, I'm just providing an idea that you can also open up to them to get any thoughts they have. The reason we want that is if you're going to take the whole session and talk in a structured way, they may have a question that completely changes everything you would have said. So by giving them a chance to kind of share, even if it's concerns or thoughts or, nervousness that they've been thinking about coming in, what they're going to say, give them a chance to do that so you can listen, most importantly, listen to what it is they said, let them know that you've heard them, and then either negotiate or maybe even a slight little challenge back in terms of what the nature of the process is compared to what they're hoping you do, like the conversation around, we don't know what we want our child to do. You give them the answer. Well, we can re-educate a little bit. And the way we re-educate them is we explain the nature of career counseling right from the beginning. So that first session, and we'll see that in a moment too, part of the structure is maybe having a handout, something that you can email them or that they can look at that really talks about what the nature of this process is about. Parents don't know. And so by giving them some understanding of what it's about, it's easier for you to explain why you're not giving advice or why you're facilitating opportunities that may not be the one the family wanted, right? Because you're explaining it in a way that makes sense and is understood as a profession. This is how we're doing the work we do. And you're trying to help them get into that frame. And then, then they know how you're going to respond in these things. It's not coming out of left field as you begin to, just give them some new ideas. For the results section, same thing when you're providing results, right? Lots of empathy. Parents are committed. They're working hard. We want to give them that sense of positive feedback. And then again, in the minutes we have, you're going to be describing the results. But again, letting them know right away. There could be 10,000 things they want to know. Sometimes getting results like that is overwhelming at first because it doesn't all make sense. And they need time to process. So the idea that there's additional time is hopefully a way of allowing you and the parents to kind of relax about how much you're going to get through in this single session. So important that we're just being present with them, because if they trust us and we build that working alliance, it's so much easier for us then to facilitate any other issues and challenges that may come up, because they know you do believe in them and they know that you trust them and that you're really invested in their child. Questions or thoughts?
This kind of addresses quite well one of the challenges we've been facing with at least stating what amount of time we have and what do you want to achieve in that specific time frame.
Yeah. And I'll come back to that in a moment too, because we want to also give them time checks. So it's not because, and I don't know how you all are, but I have dear colleagues and students that, you give them 3 minutes to give a presentation and 25 minutes later, they're saying, "Oh, good. How did I do?" Well, you had 3 minutes. How come it took 25? Well, they don't see the time passing. They thought it only took 5 minutes. They just went over a little bit. No, you went way over. So it's going to be similar when we're working with our clients as well, that they're not aware, right, that the time is going. And so it's up to us to kind of put in some push-ins, and I'll show you what that can sound like and look like. It's very, very easy to do in terms of just slowing down the process, giving that time check, making sure that they're aware. And it's helpful for the client because that talking and talking and talking is part of their anxiety of trying to work out all the things and trying to make sure they're clear. When you break in, give some clarifying, or you give some nice reflection statements, they know they're being heard, and that gives them a real sense of safety and a sense that you're in control and know what's happening. So it's a very powerful kind of tool set. But this idea here, there are a few areas of the working alliance that this meta-analysis came up with. And one of them, the first one is providing an orientation that, in fact, a lot of the effective practices is seeing just how ready the client is to engage in the full process, which we're doing with the student. But for the family, it's also an orientation to what is career counseling all about? What is career development all about? What is our way of doing this all about? And it helps them to orient, as I said from the beginning, it helps them orient exactly how they should be responding and reacting. And there may be some challenging pieces, but a lot of it is, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know. So we're trying to help educate them in terms of the process. So this is not going to be a simple piece, because you're going to have to figure, based on the training, based on the schools you're in, based on that whole piece, what is that kind of mission and agenda we have around career development? How does it fit within our particular context? So I'm not saying it's an easy thing to write, but I would hope you would share them with each other so that you can learn and see, what might work. But I think having something concrete that the parents are able to look at, so that as you're talking through, they can see and understand what's happening, I think will be very effective. Any thoughts on that? Is anyone doing that already in that session when you talk with the family?
Yes. Please go ahead.
You're on mute, Anuruddha. No, I see the hand up.
So I see another question while Anuradha figures out the mute button. What must a parent clearly
Hello,
understand?
can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you now.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for coming up and giving us basic tips. I just wanted to share that recently I was in a career counseling session, the one-to-one counseling session, and fortunately, few parents did join. And I'm happy to share that I proceeded almost in the similar fashion, setting the context and also understanding the time frame and the anxiety. So it was quite a fruitful session, and parents really appreciated that part. And they had a lot of questions, but we addressed them one by one. So I think it's really helpful understanding from you and knowing that I'm on the right track as far as handling the questions by the parents is concerned and taking care of the whole session. So thank you so much for
No,
reaffirming my
fantastic.
process. My
Fantastic.
process is right and I'm doing it the right way. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you're doing a tremendous job. And I want to just echo something I started, as I said earlier, but just bring it up and again, which is you're also creating safety because families don't know where this conversation is going to go, and that can be anxiety. What if you're going to take me in a direction I'm not wanting my child to do, or this or that? When you're setting the time limits, when you're giving them a chance to frame and really have voice in what's happening, you're creating a real safe environment for them to take some risks, throw out some ideas, and even be flexible then in listening to you as a professional. So fantastic work. That's great stuff. Something else, Thomas?
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Sure.
No, I think one of the questions just got answered while you were talking.
Oh,
So
okay, good. Well, there we go. All right. So now the next thing that's important, as we said in Working Alliance, is kind of going over the goals and tasks. And so the frame for this is I've got two ways of thinking about it. When you're talking with family for the first time, which we just heard, like, what is this whole thing about? We talked about having a sheet that you can hand out, but also just spending time sharing the details about what the career development process is. You're going to be moving away from this idea that we're trying to make a decision and we're trying to find out the perfect job to really looking at the talent and skills and really examining the pathways, at least three pathways that we talked about earlier that are aligned with those so that the student knows they have choices and they have backup plans. And that can also help us then, and I'll share that in a moment, how we can negotiate with family in terms of family with strong attitudes about things. But again, you can see this idea of here's what we're doing. And then, as we heard before, asking what are the questions families have so we can start getting a list. And that allows us to frame the timing of the session as well as figure out which questions we want to hold to and explain to them. We're not going to be able to get that today, but I can send you something in writing, or we can have another session on that thing, things like that. But it allows you then to make sure that you address the issues that they find relevant, which should align pretty closely with what your plan was for the day, right? That's the nice part. But now you're putting it back in their words. You're putting it in a framing that they understand that they're ready for. And it can just, again, establishes that sense of credibility. You're a professional, you know what's happening. And I feel good about being with you as you're talking. I feel like you're flexible, you're responsive. You may not agree with everything, but I feel like you're respecting me as an adult. And I think those are the ways that we can begin to get the leverage we need when things aren't quite aligned perfectly. And then same thing then with the results session. What's the goal? We're going to talk about the results. I want to explore your ideas on next steps. Or it could be building a plan that we can both work on together, right? Making family realize they are a core component of this whole process. We're not taking them out. We're not doing something away from them. We're doing something to support them and their family in this process, right? And they may not feel like that. They may not know what that is. They may not know what steps they can play. And that's what we're going to be able to provide them with some ideas. So it's a nice way to I think it's a way of just explaining that we're not giving them something that's finished. We're giving them the next step in their child's navigation and their journey, and we want to continue talking about those pieces. So, again, I think it can be just a helpful framing for what's happening. But now let's talk about some challenging situations. Now I'm going back to my experiences as a counselor and doing this kind of work. So I've got lots of experiences in those spaces. One of my favorites was a client who would just keep talking. Now, we can't build a relationship unless we can explain to them that we've heard it, right? And the only way we can say we've heard it is getting a chance to reflect or to ask a deep question or clarifying that really says we've been listening, right? But if they're talking the whole time, we can't do that. So what I suggest and what I've done in my professional work was pause them. Okay, whoa, yeah, just can we stop for just a second? I take a little short breath just to kind of slow it down. And I say, and I basically say, I want to summarize what I've heard so far. And then what I'm hitting are the themes. The client, as we said, the client thinks they've only been talking for 30 seconds and it's been 5-6 minutes, right? They're not getting that. When you stop and you summarize the themes, they feel not only heard, but they feel that you're holding them in a safe environment. because you're helping to, because they're trying to work it all out and you're finding discrete, meaningful components, right? So I know it's hard sometimes to stop, but actually you're going to be doing them a great service in creating that safe environment while trying to slow down a little bit or maybe ask a clarifying question to go deeper in a particular area so you can start narrowing down the focus or what may be going on within the session, right? So that's one of the options that you have. And I do find that I have done that with those certain clients, that's something, and in all cases, they've really enjoyed being able to be heard and feeling that they do have really important things that they're talking about. The other, though, is time checks. 10 minutes left. Got to let them know, right? So now they have time to orient if they had other questions, if there's some other topics that they haven't gotten to, if there's some things that are unresolved that they really want to let you know, they have a chance to be able to say that in these next few minutes. Again, summarizing the themes of what's been talked about, and then as you're inquiring about the issues, giving them a chance to do that. And then with about 2 minutes left, if it's clear you're going to need to reschedule or you're going to have another appointment, you've got time then to do that and still ending on time. It's sort of a type of you're helping them respect your identity and your professional, who you are as a professional, the fact that you do have time limits and there are other people in the world that you need to be responsible to. That respect goes both ways, because when you're doing the self-respect, you're also saying how much you respect them as well. And that if other clients are in there, you're going to be respecting their time as well. So I do think I don't see it as a negative. I know that sometimes there is a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stuff happening and they'll wait. I've had clients that wait for the last 5 minutes and just dump a whole bunch of stuff. But in time, they'll learn. If you have more than one session with the parents, they'll start to understand how this can work. Okay. And then same thing with detail. Sometimes they're going to be talking. So in that last 10 minutes, they might start going into details, and you're realizing you're not going to they have much more to talk about. I will stop them and say, okay, maybe we could just start with the headings, right? What are the topics you want to follow up on? Not the details at this point, right? And what that allows you to do is understand which are the big headings. So like, let's say they have 5 headings, and it was the 5th heading that's actually the one that's most relevant and really important to get to. You can then paraphrase or say something back to that 5th one that you never would have heard if you just let them go on for the end of the session. Does that make sense? It's helping you understand where they're at in the space, what their unresolved challenges might be, and trying to let them get it all out before you leave the session, so you're fully aware of how they're doing, what's happening, and what you might need to work on as you go forward. Thoughts on that? I know that's a lot in the mechanics of this, but it is about trying to manage, some of those challenges that come up. Are there some other typical client patterns or parents as you're talking that you have issues with? I know we'll go back to the ones around aspirations and differences of, in terms of the child and stuff. We'll do that in just a second. But are there any other client issues or things with parents that you'd like to put on the table? Thomas, anything on there?
I think I have a few comments on what you already shared, because some were like really, I had a few aha moments, right, when you were saying that we don't do enough regular time checks is definitely one that we should be including. I see a hand up, Dr. Parul,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
Uh, Thank you so much for the session, sir. So I just wanted to know that in Indian setup, sometimes it happens that when I'm trying to convince a person that this child is showing aptitude and interest and everything in line with a particular profession, but they are rigid for a particular conventional profession only, and they do not get convinced, even though the child is convinced. So, how to deal with this kind of a situation?
Yeah, thank you. This is the one that I've seen a lot. I know it's been on everybody's mind. So let's talk about it directly. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that I think for today's world of work, and we have great research on it, that holding on to 3 goals is better than 1 for lots of reasons. I think that if you provide that, here's what the career counseling process is about, and we talk about the fact that we're no longer just deciding the right career, we're recognizing that the world of work is changing, and so we need multiple options. then you're letting the parent know ahead of time that you're going to be focused on multiple options. And so one of those options is the parent's particular goal set. Option number two, the child's. And now we need to talk about a third, right? What's a third pathway? And then when parents are wondering, well, why? Well, you can start to explain that and explain it in terms of it could be labor market, it could be the multiple skill sets, the transferability could be part of it. Two, you can have them go home and investigate more about the economic opportunities or the different kinds of employment opportunities so they can discover on their own which of these has the most viable options as well. It may be that the one that the child is looking at has great economic opportunities. I found this, when I was working in with Singapore. I think one of the early ones we talked about was the parent who wanted the child to become, the child wanted to be a nurse. It was a male nurse, and father said no until the student showed the father all the research and data, the assessments, the economic, all of that stuff. And the father was like, oh, yeah, that looks great. Because our parents don't know that these other pathways have viable opportunities for their children. So I think it's a negotiated process, but you're setting it up already that this isn't about finding the right answer. It's about understanding that we have transferable skills, we have talent that can go in many places, and the more we understand the different places it can fit, the more likely we are to be successful because of this constant change in what's happening in the world of work. That new opportunities are coming up all the time. We want to take advantage of it. And so I think that's one element of it. The other thing that's to highlight under what I'm saying is that when we start to make decisions about whether something's viable, there's almost like a scavenger hunt that you can create for the family and the students which just says, what information do you need about that occupation that you're wanting to learn more about? So we're teaching them the skills to understand that we should be looking at labor market. Is there a possibility this job is going to happen? What are the education requirements and pathways to get there? What are the economic kind of outcomes if we go in this direction? Things like that. So there's a range of information that we need to have before we make the decision. In the most cases for families that I've worked with, is they don't know. They know it's prestigious. They know that the family's going to have great pride if the student goes into that area, but they know nothing about that particular area in terms of all of those other kinds of questions. And so it's a matter of trying to help them see more of that, but also see that there are other viable options that may meet that criteria. And then hopefully we're getting something where it's aligned more with the student as well as family. So again, it's a negotiation in those ways. I've also
Thank you
seen,
so much, sir.
yeah, please. Yeah, is that okay?
Sir, thank you so much. Thank you
Okay.
so much, sir.
So now we give you another way of thinking about it too that I've seen happen. So I've also seen it where families are saying, well, I'm not telling you you must do this, right? But they're putting pressure on it. And I've seen it in situations where multiple times where the parents want the student to go into engineering or some kind of a math science career, and they really want to go into being an actor. They want to go on the theater, right? And so here you've got an interesting situation. Well, first of all, the answer is yes, we want both. So if they're in school, continue doing theater work while also doing well in school, because we're allowing them to continue building as well as expressing that part of their identity that they're most interested in. I've seen the compromise where the child just says, okay, I'll continue going in engineering, but I'm also going to join a theater group, that it could be a community theater group or some kind of volunteer or other things to continue allowing that part of myself to continue growing. And so there's kind of this compromising that's happening where it's a both and as opposed to one or the other. So I think there's some ways in which that can happen. But I want to continue to tell you, nurture that student's ideas, especially when it's in creative arts. Because if they're an artist, right, the skills they have transfer over into engineering in ways that we can't imagine, right? And students get that, the creativity, the way they think about solving problems, the way they see the different dynamics and issues is something that we can often not train. It's not going to come from a textbook. It comes from their having a very different way of seeing the world. So nurturing anything that's creative and expressive and all of those things, whether it's music and all those things, we want all of it. We want them to have a space to be able to build on that because it's really going to support them in the world of work. We need new ideas. We need people that are fresh and can see the world in a different way. And we need to really make sure that parents understand the value that has. Okay. So big part in terms of that. Whew, that was like a long lecture, Thomas. I don't know what happened. You see what happens? Some people get talking and you just can't stop. Other areas or other thoughts in terms of those areas? Because I'm kind of at the end of my piece. I just wanted to set this up and then spend the rest of the time in more conversation. I'm going to stop the share then too.
Right. So I think we can open up to questions or
Yeah.
any other thoughts from anyone while they were continuing with this process, because I think a lot of us try with expectation setting. I don't know whether we are able to replicate that in every conversation. I think most of us here might have been part of uh, engagements where we have 10 students working with us in a 5 hour duration, and it kind of becomes a little difficult to hold that consistency always. Uh, so any thoughts or any questions from anyone would be welcome.
And while we're bringing it, there is one that came in early in the chat, was around when parents are unaware of their child or just unwilling to accept that their child has some special needs and special challenges. That's a big one. That's a big one. And I think our power is in being able to provide some data, right? But also framing it not as a deficit, but as a challenge and opportunity. There are things where if the child is having trouble reading, right, there are other, it's interesting, you will find that they compensate in other ways. Focus on those strengths that are coming out too. So even though if they're not able to read, their interpersonal skills are often quite strong. They're trying to compensate by other areas, their hands-on tool things that they're doing where they can see it and then they can work with it. Those are very powerful skill sets. And so we want to also, anytime we're talking about any special challenges or needs they might have, we're talking about in relation to what the accommodations and supports they need to be successful. I don't care about the definition of the problem. What I want to know is, can we get these supports and pieces in to optimize their learning, right? And not needing to label or to decide that this is what those things are, because the parent doesn't have to, be focused on their child has a label. It's more of how do we design the resources to really support your child. It's not easy. I know that. It's a loss experience for the family, and that's something else we have to recognize. They thought they were getting this child, and instead this one showed up. It's sort of like whenever we get a new dog, we always go through the shelters and different places. You think you're getting this dog, and then you do a genetic test and find out, no, not even close. They've got about these other different things, and sometimes lots of anxiety that you didn't realize you were getting. So this is part of the adaptability as families. It's hard, but we have to support them in the loss as well as really recognize the value, the strengths, and just the amazing skills and things that this child has. So that's part of it. Okay, other questions, Thomas?
I think most of them got answered, at least for the ones I shared earlier. Bhavna, Manju, do you have any other questions, or anyone else more than welcome to ask? Bhumika, please go ahead.
Hi, Scott.
Hi there.
I'm just wondering, hi. So we are talking of setting expectations where we know that we'll be meeting the child multiple times, but there are also projects where we meet the child only maybe once, and it's a short half an hour to 40-minute session, right?
Yep.
And at such times, parents and students come with very huge expectations. Like someone earlier pointed out, they expect you to make the decision and tell them what to do, and it's not going to be that. That's not what you're doing. How do you bridge that gap? What sort of approach where you know what the limitations of the sessions are, but you don't want to tell them the limitations, but how do you manage that large gap in expectations?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with you having a program, right? You've got some sessions that are going to be, multiple. You've got some that are one-shot, quick sessions. They need to see that. It's almost like a syllabus of here's the kinds of things that are going to be happening this year. And within those, very clearly stating what the plan is, what's going to be happening. And then I think you need, because everyone does, and who doesn't want a decision? One of the things we found is in early multicultural counseling, it was like, oh, this particular group wants advice giving. Well, who doesn't want advice giving? Everybody wants advice, but we also know that doesn't really work, right? It's the process of awareness and becoming, in those things. So I recognize that this is normal in the sense of wanting that. So we just need to make sure that we're clarifying what's going to happen and a rationale as to why, and even a statement around sometimes families want advice to have the right answer. This is why that doesn't work. This is what we're going to be doing instead, which is giving options, because I can give you the answer today, but tomorrow it's irrelevant. So we're going to learn the skills, We're going to learn how. It's that learning how to fish type of a thing. And we explain that up front so that at least they know that when we then put the boundary conditions on these conversations, they know exactly where it's coming from, right? And then I would say the same thing for those short ones. It's the same process. We're going to start with an opening, warm welcome, get some clarification. Here's what we're working on. But it's already got a larger context that you've already set up. So they're coming in hopefully with a better mindset on that. And then just all you're doing is clarifying that, are we all in agreement that this is what this is about? So it will get easier as you gain reputation, as your credibility grows. And that's something that we haven't talked much about today, but that idea that you're first establishing credibility in the session. As parents have a great experience, they're going to talk about it. And now people are going to come to you knowing, A, you're a professional, and two, that you're going to be able to frame this in a way that's going to be very helpful, even though they don't know exactly what it is, but they can trust you. So big stuff on that. Great point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rashmi.
Yeah, hi, Scott. Thanks. So my concern lately, when I've been doing the counseling sessions, many parents have this concern that their children are addicted to mobiles,
Yeah.
either through gaming, and and we know that we have to use the technology, but they ask us, how to balance it and how to ensure that the children are using technology in a positive way. So what to do when this issue comes up?
Yeah, so that's a big issue, and we should probably actually, Thomas, bring in I can get a colleague, an expert, to talk some on that. But let me give you my thoughts on it. First of all, every generation has been concerned that whatever's happening technology-wise is going to destroy their children. In the United States, it started with jazz. Oh, that jazz music is going to destroy things. When the television came out, oh my gosh, this is going to destroy, and it has. Alzheimer rates have gone up, all kinds of early death rates. The more television you watch is awful. In fact, I'd probably say that if it's a health concern, probably the television watching is even more than the mobiles. However, we do know the mobiles have issues on both ends. One, they, unlike us, right, in our generation, this is their tools. This is how they do things. This is their way of operating. So it's not that the mobile is the separate thing. This is their way of thinking, interacting, and everything else. There are some negatives when all of a sudden they're getting negative pieces, the stress, and we've got research saying if they've got it in schools, the tension that they are to keep up, really problematic. So we do have to monitor all of those things. And then you're right. What are the ways in which we can create safety to make sure content-wise they're in the right space? I will say that part of that is a positive relationship with family, right? The family caring about supporting so the child knows that they're cared for. It's when the children aren't cared for that they often go into other places that we don't want them. That's a challenge. So we have to be thinking in a more holistic fashion about the whole family structure and support as we go forward. And the students also have to have hope and purpose in their lives. That's what we're providing. So we have found, for example, that in Colorado, they talked about that once the girls had a sense of hope and purpose through the career development process, the teenage pregnancy rates dropped in their community. So that all of a sudden they're thinking about themselves differently. They're for students that are not doing well academically, they start going to bed earlier. They stop doing some of the social things that they were engaged in, right? So we have a role to play, which is providing them with something that's exciting that they want to go after. And it's when it gets blocked or when they're in a family system that won't support them, these are things that are going to be challenging. But we can help to really step over that by giving them a sense of purpose that we believe in with them, right? We can take over that adult role, that mentoring component, and oftentimes that gives them now a new way of thinking about organizing themselves. So I'm putting the social media challenge in a larger context, but I do realize we need to have someone come in who's an expert that can talk more about the data and what's happening in that. But I'm not going at it as oh my gosh, we need to, we have this awful thing. This is technology. This is how they work. We don't want to just be taking away. We want to be managing and then making sure that we are supporting them in a way that they'll thrive through this process rather than getting taken out and dealing with all the stress and challenges. So.
Yeah, thanks. One more thing, because, we are also facing at times students who are addicted to mobiles, gaming
Exactly.
and all.
That's why we need to have the expert. Yeah, we need to talk about that.
And the thing is, once or twice I had this experience that they were verbally, like they were quite violent when they were told, that
Exactly.
you have to stay away from the mobiles.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
No, exactly. That's why I want to have an expert in so we can
Yeah.
talk in those areas around what that looks like, what the exact kind of the diagnostic pieces are for you to know about, and then also strategies for how to address it. Because you're right, it's a very challenging situation for some of our students that are in that space.
Yeah.
It's a very important issue.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Is it Sandhya?
Yes. Good evening, Scott. I just wanted to inquire, like many of the parents, they come with a fixed mindset, something
Yeah.
like something like unfulfilled dream which they had earlier.
Mhm. Mhm.
They want they come to the session trying to validate, like my son should follow this kind of dream.
Yeah.
And when during the session, they just come while speaking to us prior to the session, ma'am, please convince my son to follow this
I know.
particular profession
Exactly.
because I feel he's more suitable for this one only. And
Hmm.
after some probing, I come across and they tell me, ma'am, I wanted to do this. So I
Right.
just want him to continue with this.
Hmm.
So I have my own ways, but I would like you to elucidate me
Yeah.
some upon something like how to deal with that.
Yeah. So again, I think having some prior information that the parents have read that that's not your job, right? That this is how this process works. So they need to have an orientation that helps with that. But again, but also in this specific case, right, there's something happening when you talk about that. It's also going to be common, especially for the moms, right, that had dreams that they were not able to do, right? And they want to make sure their child has those opportunities. We want to connect to where that is. I think the first question is, go tell me about that. That's my question. Can you tell me, I really need you to commit it. Can you tell me about that? And let them start going with the idea that you nailed it, right? There's something about them that's going on here. It could be that it's a family pride thing. It could be that it's this was my dream and what I really wanted and I'm really holding on to. Tell me more about that, right? What happened? Hear about that. And then so what you're doing is you're connecting with them so they know you've heard them. And then we talk about it as an option. You know what? We're going to have three options. So that's certainly an option we can talk about. But this isn't a process of deciding because what happens when this happens and they can't get to it or something else happens, right? That we need to have multiple pathways today if we're going to be successful. And so we're helping them understand that we heard them, we appreciate that. We're not going to tell them no, but we can also help them investigate. And so then as there's three plans, they can begin comparing together as a family project what that looks like. I also think that it's helpful that parents often have not explained to their child where this is coming from, right? It's just an answer, and I'm the parent, so do as I say, right? But having an opportunity, especially, and this is something that's happened a lot in the United States when we started doing these career planning, that so many young women would come to talk about their experience and say, because of the process, I have a better relationship with my mother because they had the talk that they've never had. So there's something about the chance to talk about the dreams and aspirations that we both had that I think can be very powerful. It can help the child have a better understanding of where this is coming from and what it's about, right? And then once we're aware of that, in time, especially when it's a funny type thing, they can all laugh about it too, because oh, there goes dad again on the, it becomes part of the discourse. It doesn't have to block their development, but it's just a part of something that they can think about and consider, as they're moving forward. But it is hard. The other thing I'm going to say is start parents early. I've done this with parents too. Sit them down and do the career development process with them. Show them how the system works. Show them that there are transferable skills that give us opportunities and a number of great opportunities. And you know what? Our system is going to help you find it and it's going to help you learn about them. So they don't have to feel like it's all abstract. They can actually start seeing these different opportunities not with a full intention of a goal in mind, just the general landscape of how we go about this. I'm hoping that early on, before they've made that decisions, right, around their child, that they can be engaged in some of these activities so they can realize, oh, there's more here that we need to be able to be considering. So it's educating, bringing them along as part of the process so that we have basically we have another person doing some career work with them, another mentor in the room when we're working with their
Yeah.
families.
We can do
Yeah.
the bridging part.
Exactly. But remember that as you were talking, not to take offense when the parent has such a strong thing. Let's talk about it. Tell me about that. Understand it. Figure out where is this a pain issue? Is this an aspirational issue and a loss that they had? All those elements that allows you to connect deeper with the family and let them know that, yeah, I get this. Fantastic. But it doesn't change the process because we know it's going to be better for the child to have multiple pathways, one of which certainly can be with this.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And so the conflict, somebody just said, well, what if there's a conflict in terms of how the parents want to do it? This is why you set the terms early by giving them an orientation to what you are going to be doing in career development. This is our process. It's written out. Here's the schedule. Here's what it looks like. So the parents know you have a process. This is how it's going to work. If they want to take their child out of the process, that's their call. But this is how it's going to work. And this is the role we want you to play as parents. These and our expectations, right? We want you to be open. We want you to be exploring with your child through the process. And here's what your child's going to be doing. So it's sort of like a setting almost the terms of a contract for how these services and our relationships with your student and with you as a parent are going to go. And setting that up early without the stress. See, the stress is when they come in with results or when they know it's happening. We want to do this well in advance so there's less stress, less of that, and then we can talk through it.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, these are such great questions. My goodness. Some other?
I think we got most of the questions answered. We have time for one more, or we can close the session if not.
Well, let's get at least one more. Come on. Who's got one more? See?
Go ahead, Bob.
Anna?
All right. So when we say that, we should ideally be suggesting 2, 3 careers, maybe one depending on the student's aptitude or a skill set or parents' career, aspiration. What if the 2, 3 careers that we are thinking of suggesting require different kind of preparation, cracking an entrance exam? So how to deal with that kind of a situation? Should we suggest only allied careers which require similar kind of preparation? Or how to go about it? Or maybe we can suggest one right after their school and one after graduation. How to deal with that kind of a situation?
Yeah, thank you. So one, I want to flip it away from your figuring it out and managing it to self-discovery. We want the student to discover the pathways in education and training, the costs for each of those. So we're not telling them no, we're having them begin to explore. Think about it as someone who wants to be an athlete and just isn't really good. We don't want to tell them, you're really not good. We want them to say, great, go for it. Try it. And through the feedback that did make the team, didn't, things aren't moving, they'll get the idea of, oh, maybe this isn't going to be an option, right? But that doesn't mean we can't find other things in sports that they can do. The athletes are just one part of the occupational system. Let's talk about other things you enjoy in that area that you can be doing, right? And so each of those will have different skill sets, different training, different economic opportunities. That's what we want them to discover. And we're not discovering it as a decision-making piece. We're discovering it as a skill set that they can apply when other opportunities come up. When it's time to make that decision as they're leaving high school for that next step, you're right. Then we need to balance all those out, but they have the tools to do it. They've already been doing it all the way through to be understanding this is the information I need. These are the things I need to consider. And when it's time to focus on that next plan, right, if you're going to choose this particular major that may shut out other opportunities, that's okay by that point because they've done the research, they've done the evaluation, and now they're selecting into something that is viable or fits with all of the other information they have.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Remember also that in a lot of our occupations, about 70% of the skill sets are the same. They're interpersonal, right? They're relational, organizational, executive functioning, planning. They're all the same sets of skills. It's just a different technical skill set that they might need. So even if someone, like we've had people go in and become a rocket scientist and they're fantastic at it, and then they go to counseling and they want to be a counselor. Right. That's a pretty big difference, but it's because the human skills they had are the ones they most value the most. They brought those they needed those in the physics and the rocket science. They need them just as badly as we need them in counseling. So I would just say that in time, we'll find that there is a lot of skill sets to go back and forth, but the economic repercussions of going down a particular pathway, spending all this money and not working out is a big issue that we want time, taking our time. We don't need to worry about it in the beginning. We do before they finish, school. We want that economic reality. How that looks.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I do think we are probably near the end, unless there's one more comment or quick point. We've got a couple of minutes. Thank you so much. This was a lot. It was fun. I'm glad we recorded so we can look through back over the themes and we can kind of focus on if there's some other readings or other things you might want to look at around some of these topics. But I think trusting in the listening skills is going to go a long way, and also taking the time to really establish what your program is, writing it out, sharing that widely, even having an orientation for families so they can know exactly what it is, and having that recorded. So when it's 2 a.m. and they're worried about the meeting with you the next day, they can go back and see it again to know what the expectations are going to be and what they should expect. Those are all things that I think will support you in being able to have some flexibility as you work with certain parents and certain issues. So, all right. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Okay, Thomas, we'll get back together around AI as well as looking at media and kind of addiction qualities of that.
Let's do this more often then.
We will. All right. Take care.